Hey, happy Wednesday. I hope everyone's doing well today. I am Joshua Betancourt, and this is Paradigm Shifting. It's a channel I created to help in any way that I can with the challenges that we face and, how to better kind of improve our communication and our toolkit to live a more meaningful, joyful, influential life. Today's talk is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really kind of excited about what I'm going to do here today, but also just hopeful that this message reaches people that need it, essentially, because a lot of us do. So we're talking about the mental health crisis that humanity is dealing with now, and some of the implications that are relevant to this mental health crisis. And so, this is paradigm shifting, and yeah, let's do it. Cool. So thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'm really grateful for your presence here, right? For your attention. This topic that I'm talking about today is really near and dear to my heart because of two reasons. One is because I've traversed a chasm similar to this, and I know that it is relative to every human being on the planet that deals with challenges, mental health challenges, whether that is, anxiety, depression, grief, the whole host of interpretations of life that create challenges for us, and I know to some extent those issues and those challenges can be very, very deep rooted, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about that, but on the premise of what are the implications of this crisis that we're experiencing. I was watching a podcast recently, The Diary of a CEO, and Sadhguru was on being interviewed, and he mentioned that the WHO, World Health Organization, I think back in 2021 or 2022, declared that we were at the beginning of what is the first collective mental health pandemic that the world has ever seen. And when he said that, it kind of struck me as there's some truth to that, and it's pretty evident in the world around us, and in the world that we're seeing around us, and the way that people are operating, and the challenges that people are experiencing, and especially between the dynamic of the masculine and the feminine, which I think is an important component to this story and to what's happening. And I won't dig deep into the history of why society is structured this way and what's kind of driving us to perceive the world in this way, but I do believe it's by design. I will say that, right? The way that our society is structured, and I do believe that there is intention behind the way that we live from day to day that has eroded the family unit, that has eroded masculinity to a certain degree, that's put women in challenging positions of having to take on the responsibilities of the masculine and the feminine, and there's this balance that is lost, right? We're off balance, and you can see that easily, right? And kind of the divorce rate, and the hypersexualization of our society, especially in the United States, but all across the world, and all the challenges that people are dealing with in this way. And so the end result and the statistics that we're starting to see related to this are pretty powerful. So this I pulled off of a website tied to kind of mental health statistics, and it's giving us some kind of real percentages and numbers related to, and this is based on I think numbers from 2021 and 2022 that gives us an idea of the extent of the issue, right? That 21% of adults are experiencing mental illness in some way, right? So that equates to 50 million people in the United States. 15% of them had a substance abuse disorder in the past year. And this is scary. 93% of them didn't receive any treatment. There's lots of reasons behind that, but we'll start to see a correlation between, insurance and the ability to actually pay for treatment, which is beyond the grasp of most people, which is really why I'm doing this, right? Is to offer up an alternative and hopefully reach people who need help. 4.8% of adults are reporting serious thoughts about suicide. And we're going to take a look at some of those numbers. So that's over 12 million adults that are actually considering or thought about suicide. 11% of adults who have identified with two or more races seriously thought about suicide. So the issue is starting to become very relevant and present in minorities. There's some good news on the child and teen front, right? 16% of youth are suffering from at least one major depressive disorder in the past year. That's more than 2.7 million youth are experiencing major severe depression. And 55% of adults with mental illness receive no treatment. And that's over 28 million people who are kind of just managing this and dealing with the challenges of life without actually receiving any treatment. And so these statistics, go further in talking about, the lack of availability of support in the United States from a medical perspective, a mental health perspective. And so, I want to put a disclaimer out there, and I'm not a mental health practitioner, right? I'm a neuro-linguistic programming master practitioner, which is more along the lines of coaching. So I don't act in a therapeutic way in any way whatsoever, and that's not the intention of what this is about. But really, this is about kind of highlighting some of the challenges that we're seeing in the world, and some solutions that I think that we as individuals can actually make here. So this dates back to 2020, but what we see is a rise in the world's negative experience index, meaning that more and more consistently, and I'm sure this is jumped since in the last 3 years, but more and more consistently, people are starting to have a pessimistic outlook on the way that the world is, on their lives, on society, on government, right, and politics, health. I mean, all across the board, relationships. It's becoming a pretty obvious thing that people are, aligning to a more pessimistic outlook on life, and that's having an impact, right? It's having, some type of impact. And here's where the numbers get kind of grim. And so this is from the CDC, the latest numbers from the CDC, and I'll go into another graph here in just a moment, but it shows the overall suicide deaths for 2021 and 2022, and we'll take a look at the projections for 2023 here in just a moment. But overall, we're hovering around 50,000 deaths in the United States by suicide alone. So year over year from 21 to 22 is a 2.6% increase. But the really fascinating number here, I don't know if fascinating is the right word, the really sad number here is the disproportion of men that are actually committing suicide versus women, right? Like we can see that the brunt of the pain is happening, or the brunt of suicide is happening, or people that are committing suicide are men, and that's almost a 4-to-1, yeah. And then this also breaks down kind of the ages and then the different ethnicities that are contributing to this number, which is staggering. When we kind of look at the ethnicities that are kind of doing this the most. It's really sad. So one of the things that I think about as I'm having this conversation is that I've been on paradigm shifting for a little while now. It's been, I guess, a few years where I've been making these videos, and really the intent of the videos was to help people, right, with truly expanding their perception of their experience, and then maybe taking some action to improve the quality of their lives to some degree. And for some people that's improving relationships, and for other people that is doing some internal work and kind of becoming more healthy, right? Whether that's emotional health or mental health or physical health, right? So all of these things that contribute to leading a more meaningful life, right? With the hope of being able to lead a joyful life. And And part of that process really is challenging because we've got to look at, aspects of our life that we're not necessarily in agreement with, that we don't necessarily like. And when I was doing some self concept study, one of the things that was illuminated for me is that, and I've said this a couple of times on previous videos, but the degree of pain that you experience related to an issue is directly correlated to its value and the degree of importance of that value. And so if value something and it's not showing up in your life, then you're inevitably going to feel pain because you're not living up to this vision and this idea that you have of your life. And so, I think it's important for us to work with one another in order to reconcile that for people, because sometimes the expectations that we place on ourselves, right, might not necessarily be congruent with, where it is that we are at this point in time and potentially where we can go. And so you've got to take a holistic look at the way that the person, really perceives themselves from a self-concept standpoint. But, you know, the encouragement is that we have the capacity to change, right? We have the capacity to see things in a different light. And some of the clients that I've worked with in the past, really, that's a lot of the foundational work that we do is taking a look at how they're perceiving their life from their past experiences, identifying whether or not they have any preconditioned ideas, right, or subconscious beliefs that are kind of impacting their view of that. And so I think that this graph is pretty kind of interesting too, in that it shows month to month the trend from 2018 to provisionally 2023, the numbers of suicides that happen in the United States. Across the board. This is male and female, but overall, the trend, right? The trend is slightly ticking upwards. And this kind of breaks my heart, in all honesty, because in the US alone, about 4,000 people are killing themselves every month. About 4,000 people are killing themselves every month. And I think that if we can provide a better system of support, not necessarily through the traditional means of support, but how we support one another, right? As individuals, as people, how we support one another. If we can kind of be more cognizant of that, and it's hard because it's not something that you can see, right? It's not something that people necessarily offer up. Excuse me. That people necessarily offer up, especially men. We're conditioned to kind of hold everything in and not necessarily be open to the idea of communicating about our problems. The idea is that we should be resilient. We should be stoic. We should be capable of kind of handling the challenges of life and keep pushing and grinding through. And I think that to some degree there is there's value, right, in this idea of having strength and being a strong person, whether that's emotionally resilient, mentally resilient, mentally resilient, or what have you. We should have a goal to really cultivate that, but that has nothing to do and is not effective in helping someone who is in the throes of some very, very dark experiences, right, and a very, very dark moment in their life. And I think in those moments is when we need to throw a life raft. I'll tell you, personally speaking, I've gone through this, and it wasn't easy. And in fact, while in retrospect, while there were people around me that were helping to some degree, I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt that no one really cared. And the reality is that no one knew the depth of the struggle for me, right? Because it wasn't something like I wasn't going out and I wasn't socializing my problems. I'm sitting there, trying to figure out how to work my way through these current circumstances and my perception of these current circumstances so I can change my life for the better. Now, that being said, it's not about, I don't say that with the intention of wanting to place that burden or responsibility of my well-being on anyone else. Ultimately, it is my responsibility to take care of my well-being. However, that being said, the contribution that we can make to someone by just being present, right? Like Shia LaBeouf said, the ministry of presence, or just offering up an opportunity to listen to someone who needs to vent, I think is really, really important for men. You know, uh, having a representative that is there from the perspective of the divine feminine is, I think would could do so much to alleviate this problem. And I think that the way that things are trending, it's more along the lines of anyone who shows this type of weakness is ostracized, right? They're pushed away, and they're not supported in any way because it's seen as a trait of weakness. And it's just kind of the natural order of things that the way that we're wired and genetically disposed, that we want the healthiest possible partner in an intimate relationship to ensure that the success of you know our trajectory, right, our lineage continues. And so there's this you know uh, what's the word that I'm looking for, there's this contradiction in how to effectively manage this. And I think the way that it's been managed now before is it's just been like, okay, well, that's something they have to deal with, and maybe they can get some help from from a medical perspective, right? Maybe they can find a therapist. But as you see, the numbers already show that the vast majority of people never do, whether because they can't afford it, or because they just don't have insurance, or one of the other means. There might be shame associated with the fact that they're dealing with that. There may be guilt, there may be whatever. Okay, so we've kind of highlighted the problem, right? I think for men, the responsibility that they carry, the burden that they carry of being able to provide and be a provider and have, the support of their partner, I think is, weighs heavily. And if, their perception of their ability to accomplish that, will strip them away of, or strip away, their ability to be that provider, then, their self-concept and their identity is impacted drastically. And if you have a person that is, placing that, aspect of themselves, of being a father, of being a provider, of being a husband, and that's one of their primary values, and then all of a sudden something happens, like they lose their job, or they're have an accident and they're incapable of working, right? And then subsequently, because they can't live up to that expectation anymore, that their entire network of people just abandons them, then you can see how someone would easily plummet into this space of I'm not cared for, I'm not loved, I'm not valued, I'm not worthy. And then the questioning becomes, okay, well, what's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of me being here if no one loves me, right? What's the purpose of me being here if no one's here to you know to show me that I'm important, that I'm meaningful? And then ultimately that story results in some of the figures that we saw earlier. So what is it that we can do? I think if you're dealing with depression, or if you're dealing with something like this, uh, monitoring your diet, getting away from substance abuse, which is challenging, but making an effort to really look at your experiences head on, going out and taking care of yourself physically. It's amazing what exercise can do and some sun can do for your mental health. That's important. Having a tribe is probably the most important thing that we can do. Like, just finding someone that you can talk to, and that can listen is a really important thing, because your life is important and you do matter. So because of that, I thought to myself, okay, what is it that I might be able to do to help people who might find themselves in need? And one of those things is I've put a link on this video that is to schedule a call with me. If you find yourself in a situation where you're hurting and you're in pain and you don't have anyone to talk to, and you just need someone that will listen, feel free to schedule a call with me. Disclaimer: I'm not a medical practitioner in any sense, right, in any way whatsoever. But that being said, if you just need someone to listen and someone to support you, by all means, click that link, get on my calendar, and I'll be more than happy to take some time to support you however appropriate or however I can. With that being said, you know, uh, I hope this kind of has illuminated, the necessity of supporting one another, and that always be conscientious of the things that you say to others and the impact that that could potentially have. You never know what people are dealing with and the challenges that they're going through, and something that you say might change their life for the better or potentially for the worse. And so, please, please, please be considerate and kind. The world needs that more than anything. All right. This went way longer than I expected. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that this was meaningful. And until next time. All right. Ciao.